Hello there. Welcome back to Whisper Diaries. It's Natalie here, and tonight I'm whispering about something we've all experienced but rarely admit to. Those moments of powerful, undeniable attraction that arrive at precisely the wrong time, with precisely the wrong person. You know what I'm talking about. That sudden electric connection that makes no logical sense but feels so unmistakably right. The kind of chemistry that has you breaking all your own rules and questioning everything you thought you knew about yourself. The attraction that arrives uninvited and refuses to be ignored, no matter how inconvenient or complicated. So get comfortable, maybe dim the lights a little, and let me share some stories about those moments when chemistry overruled common sense and attraction broke all the rules. Let's start with a story I'm calling The Wedding Weekend, which comes from my friend Sophia. Like many stories of inconvenient attraction, this one begins with a history of tension. For years, Sophia had maintained a careful distance from her best friend Maya's older brother, Ethan. It wasn't that they disliked each other exactly. It was more complicated than that. During college, they'd had a few heated arguments at family gatherings that had solidified their mutual decision to politely avoid each other. Maya would often joke that the only thing her best friend and her brother agreed on was that they couldn't stand each other. This careful avoidance strategy worked perfectly for nearly a decade until Maya announced her destination wedding in the Napa Valley. As maid of honor, Sophia would be spending an entire long weekend in unavoidable proximity to Ethan, who was best man. Just be civil for 4 days, Maya pleaded during the planning. That's all I ask. Sophia promised to maintain a polite distance, expecting the weekend to be an exercise in strategic avoidance. What she didn't expect was for Ethan to have transformed in the 3 years since she'd last seen him. When Sophia arrived at the vineyard estate where the wedding party was staying, Ethan was the first person she encountered, helping unload luggage from cars. The years had changed him. He'd grown his hair slightly longer, developed a more confident posture, and somehow seemed more at ease in his own skin. When he smiled at her in greeting, Sophia felt an unexpected flutter that immediately confused and irritated her. Great, she thought. Now I'm attracted to someone I can't even have a conversation with without arguing. The rehearsal dinner that evening was surprisingly cordial. Seated across from each other at the long table, they managed polite small talk. Sophia learned that Ethan had spent 2 years working abroad, an experience that seemed to have softened his once rigid views, the very thing they'd clashed about in the past. After dinner, the wedding party gathered around a fire pit with wine flowing freely. As the night progressed, people drifted off to bed until just Sophia and Ethan remained, debating books, films, and life philosophy with none of their former animosity. The surprise wasn't that they were getting along. It was that they couldn't seem to stop talking, their conversation flowing effortlessly until 3 a.m. I always thought you couldn't stand me, Ethan finally said, pouring the last of the wine into their glasses. I always thought you couldn't stand me, Sophia countered, accepting the glass. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and that brief contact sent a current of awareness through her that was impossible to ignore. The next day brought the welcome party for all wedding guests. Sophia found herself hyper-aware of Ethan's presence across crowded rooms, her eyes somehow always finding him. During the group wine tasting, he slid in beside her at the bar. "Try this one," he said, offering her a taste from his glass rather than passing her a fresh pour. The casual intimacy of drinking from his glass, her lips where his had been, felt strangely charged. The rich red wine suddenly wasn't the only thing making her feel warm. That evening, the bride and groom separated for their respective bachelor and bachelorette events. By midnight, both parties coincidentally ended up at the same small-town bar, merging into one celebration. In the crowded space, Sophia found herself repeatedly pressed against Ethan, each accidental touch lingering a moment longer than necessary. When the bar closed, the group spilled out onto the street, trying to coordinate rides back to the estate. Sophia and Ethan both volunteered to wait for the last shuttle to ensure everyone else got back safely. Alone on a bench under string lights in the small town square, the air between them felt thick with possibility. "You know what's strange?" Ethan said, looking at the stars rather than at her. "I've spent years thinking we didn't get along because we're too different. Now I'm wondering if it's because we're too similar." Sophia nodded, both stubborn, both opinionated, both unwilling to admit when we're wrong, he added with a smile. When he finally looked at her, the tension that had been building all weekend crystallized into something neither could pretend not to feel. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "This is probably a terrible idea," Sophia whispered, already leaning toward him. "Definitely," he agreed, closing the distance between them. The kiss was nothing like Sophia had expected. Not that she'd ever consciously expected to kiss Ethan at all. It wasn't tentative or questioning. It was like they'd skipped all preliminary stages and landed directly in perfect understanding. His hand at her waist, her fingers in his hair, the kiss deepened with an intensity that made her forget they were in public until the shuttle driver yoinked, breaking the spell. The drive back was silent, filled with stolen glances and careful distance. Outside her door at the estate, they paused. "Maya would lose her mind," Sophia said, stating the obvious complication. "I know." Ethan nodded. "This weekend is about her. We shouldn't." "Absolutely," Sophia agreed, even as she reached for his hand, pulling him closer for one more kiss that quickly threatened to escalate, until a door opening down the hall forced them apart. The next day, wedding day, was a carefully choreographed dance of professional obligation and personal awareness. As maid of honor and best man, they stood beside Maya and her new husband, performing their duties perfectly while exchanging glances that communicated everything they weren't saying. During the reception, they maintained their distance until the very end of the night, when they found themselves alone in the venue's garden, the celebration winding down inside. "So what happens after this weekend?" Ethan asked, maintaining a respectable distance between them despite every indication that they both wanted to be closer. "I don't know," Sophia admitted. "Your sister is my best friend. We have 10 years of history, most of it antagonistic. On paper, this makes no sense, but I can't remember why we were avoiding each other in the first place. She stepped closer. And I'm not very good at denying chemistry when it's this strong. What started as an inconvenient attraction during a wedding weekend evolved into a long-distance relationship that confounded everyone who knew their history. When they finally told Maya, her response surprised them both. "Are you kidding? I've been trying to get you two in the same room for years, hoping exactly this would happen. Your arguments were always just badly disguised flirting. Sometimes the people we try hardest to resist are the very ones who slip past our defenses, turning tension into an entirely different kind of chemistry." Our next story is The Sweet Situation, and it explores that delicious tension that can develop when professional rivalry meets forced proximity. My colleague Rachel and her coworker Daniel had been competitors since they both joined their advertising firm 3 years earlier. They were the top-performing account executives, constantly vying for the same clients and undercutting each other's ideas in meetings. Their rivalry was legendary within the company, professional but intense. When they were both assigned to pitch a major potential client in Chicago, they approached the business trip with grim determination to outshine each other. They took separate flights, planned to prepare independently, and intended to maintain professional distance throughout the 3-day trip. What they hadn't counted on was the convention in Chicago that had filled almost every hotel. The company had managed to secure just one room, a suite with 2 bedrooms, but shared living space and bathroom. Neither was willing to pay for a different hotel out of pocket, so they reluctantly agreed to the arrangement. "I'll stay out of your way if you stay out of mine," Daniel said as they entered the suite. "We're both adults. We can handle this." The first evening passed in cold politeness. They worked in separate corners of the living room, occasionally exchanging necessary information, but otherwise maintaining their usual competitive distance. When Rachel needed to reference materials Daniel had, he would slide them across the coffee table, rather than hand them directly to her, as if even the briefest contact might be dangerous. The dynamic shifted the following morning when they both needed to prepare for the day. The awkward dance of sharing a bathroom, doors carefully locked, timing coordinated to avoid encounters in various states of undress, created a new awareness between them. Rachel emerged from her bedroom to find Daniel making coffee in the kitchen area, his shirt still unbuttoned at the top, hair damp from the shower. She had seen him in suits hundreds of times in the office, but something about this more casual, slightly undone version of her rival caught her off guard. "Coffee," he offered, looking up and catching her watching him. Rachel nodded, accepting the mug he handed her. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and she found herself noticing how his cologne smelled different up close than the faint traces she caught passing him in the office hallways. The pitch preparation that day was surprisingly productive. Without the audience of their colleagues, they found themselves actually collaborating rather than competing. Daniel acknowledged one of Rachel's concepts was stronger than his own for part of the presentation. Rachel admitted his approach to the budget breakdown was more compelling. "We might actually be better as a team than as rivals," Daniel commented that evening as they reviewed their slides. "Don't get used to it," Rachel replied, but her usual competitive edge was softened with something closer to friendly teasing. They ordered room service dinner and somewhere between the meal and the bottle of wine they shared while finalizing their presentation, the years of tension between them began to transform into something else. Rachel found herself noticing things she'd never allowed herself to see before. The way Daniel's brow furrowed when he concentrated, the surprisingly gentle way he listened when she spoke without interrupting, the spark of genuine respect in his eyes when she made a good point. As they moved to the couch to review the presentation one last time, the proximity became increasingly distracting. Rachel was acutely aware of Daniel's shoulder against hers as they both looked at the laptop, the brush of his hand when reaching for the wine bottle, the way he absent-mindedly ran his fingers through his hair when thinking. The transformation from professional distance to personal awareness culminated when they simultaneously reached for the laptop, their hands colliding. Instead of the immediate withdrawal that would have happened days earlier, there was a pause, a moment where neither moved away, their hands touching longer than could be explained by accident. When Rachel finally looked up from their hands to Daniel's face, the expression she found there mirrored her own realization. Years of intensely focusing on each other, even as competitors, had created a foundation of awareness that now revealed itself as attraction. "This is probably a terrible idea," Daniel said, his voice lower than usual. "Definitely," Rachel agreed, even as she leaned closer. The kiss that followed contained 3 years of pent-up tension, transforming their competitive energy into something equally intense but far more pleasurable. What had started as professional rivalry combusted into physical chemistry that made their previous conflicts seem like elaborate foreplay. The next morning, they delivered their pitch flawlessly, their newfound harmony apparent to the potential client, who signed with them on the spot. On the flight home, they faced the inevitable question of what happened next. "We can't suddenly start getting along at the office. People will know something happened," Rachel pointed out. Daniel considered this. "Or we could tell them the truth, that we discovered we're better together than apart, professionally and otherwise. What began as an inconvenient hotel booking became the catalyst for transforming one of the office's most notorious rivalries into a power couple. Sometimes the line between competition and attraction is thinner than we realize, and the person who challenges us most might also be the one who complements us best." Before I continue with our next story, I'd love to take a moment to connect with you. If you're enjoying these tales of irresistible attraction, I'd be so grateful if you'd rate this episode and leave a comment sharing your own experiences with chemistry that refuse to be denied. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to receive notifications whenever a new Whisper Diaries drops. Your engagement helps our whispered community grow and helps me create more content that speaks to your experiences. Now, let's continue with our next story of attraction that broke all the rules. Our third story is the mentor dilemma, which explores the complicated territory of professional boundaries and personal connection. My friend Olivia had just started her dream position at a prestigious marketing firm. At 32, she was an experienced professional, but new to this particularly competitive company. During her first week, she was assigned to work under James, the firm's most successful creative director, who would mentor her through her first major campaign. At 45, James had an impressive reputation in the industry. He was brilliant, demanding and known for developing junior talent. Olivia was determined to impress him professionally and establish herself as a serious colleague. Their first few meetings were strictly business. James was thorough but fair, pushing Olivia to refine her ideas while respecting her experience. She appreciated his directness and found herself working harder than ever to meet his high standards. 3 weeks into the mentorship, they were scheduled for a late evening review session before an important client presentation. The office gradually emptied until only they remained, surrounded by concept boards and strategy documents in the glass-walled conference room. As midnight approached, they ordered dinner and continued working, the formality that had characterized their earlier interactions gradually softened as they shared stories from their careers and discovered mutual frustrations with industry trends. Olivia was surprised to find James was not only brilliant, but genuinely funny, with a self-deprecating humor she hadn't expected from someone of his stature. "I had this completely intimidating image of you before we started working together," Olivia admitted, organizing their presentation materials. "Good. I work hard on being unapproachable," James replied with a smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Keeps people from discovering I'm making it up as I go along like everyone else." This glimpse of vulnerability from someone she'd perceived as unshakably confident shifted something in their dynamic. As they continued working side by side, Olivia became increasingly aware of James as more than just her mentor. The subtle cologne he wore, the way his shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms marked with unexpected tattoos, the focus in his eyes when he listened to her ideas. The presentation they were preparing was for a luxury travel client, and as they reviewed destination images, James mentioned his time living in Barcelona. "I've always wanted to go," Olivia said. "It's top of my travel list. You would love it," he said, pulling up photos on his phone. As he leaned closer to show her, their shoulders touched. Neither moved away. The architecture, the food, the energy of the city. His voice painted such a vivid picture that when he paused, the silence felt charged with possibility. When Olivia looked up from the photos to his face, she found him watching her with an expression that had nothing to do with their professional relationship. The moment stretched between them, both clearly aware of the line they were approaching. James was the first to step back. "Physically and metaphorically, we should finish the presentation," he said, his voice slightly rough. "It's getting late." They completed their work in a new state of awareness, both carefully maintaining professional distance while acutely conscious of the current running beneath their interactions. When they finally finished at nearly 2 a.m., James offered to call her a car. Standing outside the building, waiting for the car to arrive, the city quiet around them, the professional context that had structured their relationship temporarily fell away. They were just two people, standing close in the cool night air, hyper-aware of each other. "I should tell you," James said finally, breaking the silence, "that I've requested to have you transferred to Elise's team after this project." Olivia felt a surprising stab of disappointment. "Did I do something wrong?" "Just the opposite," he admitted. "You're brilliant, dedicated, and I enjoy working with you too much. That's the problem. The car arrived before Olivia could respond, leaving her to process his words on the ride home. The implications were clear. He felt the same unexpected attraction, and rather than compromise either of their professional positions, he was creating distance. The next day, they delivered a flawless presentation to the client. Their professional partnership strengthened rather than weakened by the acknowledged but uncrossed boundary between them. True to his word, James arranged for Olivia to work under Elise, another creative director, following the completion of their project. 6 months later, Olivia had established herself as a rising star at the firm, no longer in need of close mentorship. At the company's holiday party, she encountered James near the bar, their first significant interaction since the end of their professional relationship. "I hear you're leading the new hospitality account," he said. "Elise says you're the best she's worked with." "High praise," Olivia replied. "I had an excellent first mentor." The professional distance they'd maintained dissolved as the evening progressed. Without the power dynamic of mentor and mentee, they were simply colleagues with undeniable chemistry. When James asked if she'd have dinner with him the following week, the boundary that had once seemed so critical had transformed into a bridge rather than a barrier. Their relationship developed slowly and discreetly, both conscious of office, politics, but unwilling to deny the connection that had been evident from those late nights working together. Sometimes the strongest attractions are the ones we recognize, but choose to temporarily set aside, allowing them to evolve into something that doesn't require professional compromise. Our final story tonight is The Friendship Line, which explores that delicate territory where comfort crosses into attraction. My hairstylist Madeline had been friends with Ryan for nearly 5 years. They'd met through mutual friends and quickly developed the easy, comfortable friendship of two people who enjoy each other's company without complications. Ryan had been in a serious relationship for most of their friendship, and Madeline had dated various people without anything quite sticking. Their friendship was characterized by brutal honesty, inside jokes, and the kind of comfortable intimacy that comes from having no romantic tension whatsoever. They were sounding boards for each other's relationship issues, offering unfiltered advice and support through various dating disasters. When Ryan's long-term relationship ended suddenly, Madeline naturally stepped into the role of supportive friend. She listened to him process the breakup, brought over terrible movies and good whiskey, and provided the non-judgmental presence he needed. 3 months into Ryan's newly single life, they fell into a routine of weekly dinner and movies at his place, a standing Friday commitment that gave structure to his post-breakup life and became something Madeline looked forward to more than she cared to admit. One Friday in early autumn, they decided to take advantage of the unusually warm evening by having dinner on Ryan's small balcony. He'd gone all out, cooking an elaborate meal and opening a bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. "This feels suspiciously like a date," Madeline joked as he lit candles on the table. "Can't a guy make a nice dinner for his friend without ulterior motives?" Ryan laughed, though something in his expression made Madeline wonder. As the evening progressed and the wine bottle emptied, their conversation drifted from their usual topics to more personal territory. Ryan admitted he'd been reflecting on what went wrong in his relationship, recognizing patterns he wanted to break in the future. "I think I got too comfortable," he confessed. "I stopped seeing her, really seeing her, you know. I want to be with someone where that never happens, where I notice everything about them, all the time." As he spoke, Madeline became increasingly aware that the way Ryan was looking at her had subtly changed. There was an attention in his gaze that felt different from their usual interactions. He wasn't just listening, he was noticing when she reached for the wine bottle at the same time he did. Their hands touched, and instead of the casual contact they'd shared hundreds of times, there was a new awareness that made Madeline pull back as if she'd touched something hot. "Sorry," they both said simultaneously, then laughed at the sudden awkwardness between them. As the night cooled, Ryan offered her his jacket, another ordinary gesture between friends that suddenly felt charged with new meaning. When he placed it around her shoulders, his hands lingered longer than necessary, and Madeline found herself hyper-aware of his proximity. "Can I ask you something weird?" Ryan said, sitting back down across from her. "Have you ever wondered what it would be like if we weren't just friends?" The question hung between them, transforming the comfortable space they'd occupied for years into unfamiliar territory. Madeline's first instinct was to deflect with humor, their usual pattern, but something stopped her. "Sometimes," she admitted, surprising herself with her honesty, "but I always shut that thought down pretty quickly. You're too important to risk losing over a what if." Ryan nodded, understanding precisely what she meant. "That's exactly it. I've had the same thought, but lately I've been wondering if the bigger risk is not finding out." The conversation that followed was unlike any they'd had before, careful, vulnerable, and focused on what they might gain or lose by crossing the line they'd drawn years ago. They discussed their friendship, their compatibility, and the genuine fear that romantic failure could destroy something they both deeply valued. As the night grew later, they moved inside, the conversation continuing on his couch, a piece of furniture they'd shared countless times without a second thought, but which now seemed charged with potential meaning. "I think," Ryan said finally, "that I've been noticing you differently for a while now. But I didn't know what to do with that. Given our history." Madeline understood exactly what he meant. She'd been experiencing the same shift. Moments where she'd catch herself watching him laugh or explain something he was passionate about and feel a warmth that went beyond friendly affection. When he reached for her hand, the simple gesture carried the weight of 5 years of friendship and the possibility of something more. The line they'd so carefully maintained began to blur. "If we do this," Madeline said, "we need to promise each other something. If it doesn't work romantically, we find a way back to our friendship. Because I can't imagine my life without you in it, in some capacity." Ryan nodded, intertwining his fingers with hers. "That's a promise I can make. You matter too much to lose completely." Their first kiss was nothing like either had imagined, and they later admitted they both had imagined it, despite their best intentions. It wasn't awkward or tentative. It was like finding something that had been missing, a natural evolution rather than a dramatic change. Crossing the friendship line is perhaps the most terrifying rule book to throw away. the potential cost of failure so much higher than with a stranger. But sometimes the very foundation that makes you hesitate, the deep knowledge and care for another person, is exactly what makes the risk worthwhile. As I bring tonight's episode to a close, I hope these stories of irresistible attraction have reminded you of those electric moments in your own life. Times when chemistry refused to be denied, when attraction broke all your carefully constructed rules, when connection arrived in precisely the wrong package at precisely the wrong time, yet felt unmistakably right. Whether it's the tension of a long-standing rivalry igniting into something more passionate, the gradual transformation of mentorship into deeper connection, the evolution of friendship into romance, or the surprising chemistry with someone you thought you couldn't stand. These moments of undeniable attraction often lead to our most meaningful relationships precisely because they challenge our expectations. Before we part ways tonight, I want to thank you for spending this time with me. If these stories of powerful chemistry resonated with you, I'd love if you'd rate this episode and leave a comment sharing your own experience with attraction that refused to be ignored. And please hit that bell icon to receive notifications whenever a new episode drops. Your engagement helps our whispered community grow and helps me create more content that speaks to your experiences. In our next episode, we'll explore new territories with fresh stories to both soothe and entice you. Got a relationship topic you're curious about? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one and love getting your suggestions. Thank you for listening to Whisper Diaries. This is Natalie, your guide through attraction's more complicated pathways, wishing you the courage to acknowledge chemistry when it finds you, even when, especially when, it breaks all your rules. Until next time, sweet dreams, and may your own love story surprise you in the most delicious ways possible.